I have zero official training, but I am going to challenge everyone in the Koryu world to a sword fight.
G'day mates, Nate the Aussie here. How you going? So, before I start this video, thought I'd like to mention I got married last Saturday. So that was really cool. We were actually really lucky. We were able to get in just before a lockdown happened in our state, and just before there was going to be crazy rain happening sort of throughout the weekend as well. The funny thing is, on the day of the wedding, it was said to be about 90% chance, heavy rain all day. Barely a drop the whole day. So we got really lucky. So thought I'd mention that to you mates. But other than that, moving on to the topic of this video. Now, before I start, I feel I should make a disclaimer. I am not critiquing this man, Antony Cummins, as a person, right? I am not directing this as a personal critique. I'm not directing this basically at his who he is as a person, for two reasons. One, I don't know him actually on a personal level, so I wouldn't even have the knowledge to do that. But the second thing as well, and I think this is the most important reason, is because I believe that if you're going to critique what someone has said, you critique the argument that they've said, you don't critique the actual person. I personally think that's the best way to go about it. And I feel that that is a more polite and more, I suppose, intellectually genuine way of approaching it. In this video, Antony Cummins sort of talks about the idea of wanting to spar. Now, I'm not going to go on sort of the title of the video. I personally feel the title of the video is, and I understand that he wants people to actually get interested, to get a bit baited into it and click onto the video. Cool, I get that. I personally feel it's not the best choice of title in the world, and I'm going to explain why that is later, but we'll move on from that. So Antony Cummins has been doing a sort of various different kinds of work over the years, up to as long as over 8 years ago, if you're going by his YouTube channel's history. And what he is doing, or at least what he claims to be doing, I see that as a very interesting and a good goal to have. That being that we're wanting to look at Japanese warrior culture and history purely from a historical perspective, rather than from the perspective of a specific ryuha, heiho, hyoho, or in general, a specific system, if that makes sense. If we're only looking at it from the perspective of a single ryuha, or a single school, whether that be a weapon school or a tea ceremony school, whatever it is, if we look at it only from that, we're not really going to see the period for exactly what it was. And I say that because that's in general how we study history. When we're looking at history, when you're conducting historical study, and I'm approaching this from a teaching history perspective, you need to use a variety of different sources and combine them together. It's almost like pieces of a puzzle. One source, if you're looking at it like a puzzle piece, it connects to another source, and you can tell by the way it is edged and aligned how it connects to another source, and then another one, and so on and so on and so on. And you put all those pieces together, and it gives you a more clear image of the puzzle piece than, let's say, if we only used a specific, like if we only used the corners, for example, or we only used the middle four pieces, if that makes sense. The great thing about historical study is that that puzzle never gets finished. It gets more clear, but it never gets finished. And that's the cool thing about historical study, and that tends to be how I see it. So that's why I think when we're looking at history, it's important to not just look at the perspectives of ryuha and heiho and all these different kinds of things, but combine that with other things, looking at it from an academic perspective as well. And I think once we do it that way, we can get I suppose you could say, more of a 3D image of the history rather than a 2D image. So in that regard, I really do respect what Antony Cummins claims to be doing. The main critique I have in this video is he wants to, and I mean he's titled the video this as well, spar with multiple, or spar with any kind of practitioners of Koryu, Japanese sword, you name it.
But I am going to challenge everyone in the Koryu world to a sword fight. Everyone. If you're in Koryu, consider yourself challenged to a fight. It's a friendly match, friendly fun, and I hope to improve or explain or investigate Japanese swordsmanship more.
The issue I have with this is an issue, first of all, safety. And the second issue I have with this, I suppose the way I could describe it is just remembering your own background in something as well, and how that should reflect what you do. Now, Antony Cummins actually admits that he only has done Iaido for a couple of months in Japan, and that's almost all of the extent of the Japanese martial arts training that he has.
Did some Iaido with Tamiya Ryu, and I did it for 2 months, every morning for 2 months in Japan. So I studied swordsmanship in Japan. Enter the wind. Actually, I went in the morning and learnt to straighten my arm a bit.
Now, I'm not critiquing that background that he has. We all have to start from somewhere, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it is potentially very dangerous to encourage this kind of behavior. Now, even if you have full set of safety and protective kit for sparring, and he actually says that he has bought this set.
What I've done is I've ordered 2 sets of gear.
He claims he's bought this stuff, and okay, that's good. It's good to have that if you're going to be doing sparring, especially full contact. The only issue I have, though, is with safety. You can't just... I'm only saying this based on my experience with living history and with HEMA and with studying Kenjutsu. I'm saying this as politely as possible. You cannot just go out there and start sparring. And the reason why I say that is because it's very dangerous. If you don't know how to use the weapon, and if Antony Cummins is correct in saying that he only has that background, and I've seen some of his videos were talking about drawing of a sword, and one of them I actually think is just downright dangerous, and I think that I believe it was very wrong of him to encourage other people to try doing that. Okay, with control, he said, but he still encouraged it.
It doesn't matter if it looks messy, it doesn't matter about it being, the correct form. Don't worry about any of that.
I have 0 official training in swordsmanship. 0.
In general, he does not have a background in martial arts, and because of that, I believe it is potentially very dangerous for people like him to decide, okay, I'm just going to go out there and spar. It should not and does not really work like that, because you need to not just have the safety equipment, you also need to know how to use the weapons safely. It's why, for example, when you go into a HEMA school or you go into a Kenjutsu school, or what that does sparring, mind you, if they're responsible, they won't just throw you up against one of their fighters and just spar, even in protective gear. They won't do that because there's no point in making you do that. They take you through it bit by bit. While Antony Cummins is not going through a specific school, I believe it is wrong to say, oh, I will go out there and I'll spar anyone and we'll have a good time. I really do think that you need to, that you, and when I say you, I mean everyone, including me, we need to really make sure we know how to use the weapons safely before we go out there and spar, because let's face it, I've seen people get injured wearing full HEMA kit, and this is even with guys who know what they're doing. Now, if you can imagine a guy who doesn't really know what he's doing.
I have 0 official training in swordsmanship. 0.
You can imagine what the issues could be. That's my first point. He actually claims when he does the sparring, he says that anything beyond eye gouging goes.
I would like to enter into fencing, sparring, sword fighting, combat, no holds barred, obviously, as in the like HEMA, historical European martial arts, grapples, strikes, anything goes.
And the issue with that, and I'm saying this from my own experience, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people who practice any kind of martial arts will agree with me, trying to grapple with someone who actually doesn't know what they're doing is really dangerous for the person who doesn't know what they're doing. And one of the reasons why I say this, because you need to know how to fall. As weird as that sounds, if you don't know how to fall correctly when someone throws you, you could seriously injure yourself. One of the classic examples with the wrist, when you're getting someone to fall over onto the ground when you have their wrist and you twist it the wrong way, you have to, if you're being twisted that, you have to go with that. If you're going to fall down, you have to go with it. If you try and resist, your wrist could get seriously damaged. And that is the same with when you're falling, your collarbone, your ribs. There are so many things that can get damaged, even when you are wearing protective gear. And that is even with guys who know what they're doing, let alone someone who has no background in this. And that's another reason why I personally believe what Antony Cummins is saying in this video is actually quite dangerous.
To see if we can sort of try and move the game more into the HEMA game, but with some specifications there.
I'm sorry, trying to move it into the HEMA game. From what perspective are you saying this, Antony? Like, from what I know, and again, I'm saying this very respectfully, and you've admitted this, you don't have any background in HEMA. And if you do, it's very, very minor. From what sort of ground of knowledge are you making these claims about HEMA?
I'm actually not a believer. I do not believe that sparring helps you fight, to be fair. I don't think it does.
And again, this comes into a problem where, okay, from what background are you saying this, Antony?
I have zero official training in swordsmanship. Zero.
What are you basing this opinion on? Okay, sure, you have an opinion, that's fine, that's cool. But what are you basing that on? What claims are you basing that on? If you are purely looking at Katori Shinto Ryu, where they do very little, if any, sparring at all, and it's just kata, and you're using that, okay, you're not even from that yuha. If you're using that to justify it, what about all the other kenjutsu systems that do have sparring as well? Now again, I know there is evidence that goes against it, and I get that, but at least from my opinion, sparring is so easily evidenced in that it helps you fight. And by that, I mean, if we look at sparring like spontaneous weapon drills, for example. So let's say you're doing a weapon drill against an non-compliant opponent, so someone who is not going to try and let you do that technique, or not going to let you grab them or whatever, and so on. Now, Scalagrim talks about this in terms of action points. So there are only so many actions you can do before the other opponent reacts to what you do, right? So for one action point the opponent does, you can maybe do 1.5, maybe even 2. So that's a point that Scalagrim says on one of his videos. And again, I'll link Scalagrim's channel in the description below as well. But generally what I mean is that you have to take what you learn in a weapon drill, whether that be a kata, whether that be Maya's square from a HEMA perspective, or whatever it is, you need to then have the chance to practice that against a non-compliant and an uncooperative opponent, someone who doesn't want to let you do that. If what Antony is saying is true, that sparring doesn't help you fight, then why are so many militaries around the world for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years been doing sparring? Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think you should just spar and not do any drills. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that weapon drills, or just drills in general, and training combined with sparring, which is also kind of training, I suppose, put them together, I believe that is the best way. And again, even if we use it from a language learning perspective, because again, I teach Mandarin Chinese, and if you're going to teach a language, if what Antony is saying is correct, that would mean you don't need to have any kind of speaking or conversation classes with anyone to improve your language learning. All you have to do is just repeatedly listen and repeat pre-recorded conversations, dynamic, but pre-recorded conversations of two people talking, and you memorizing that and just saying it on repeat over and over again. It's so easily disproven, not just in weapons training, but in any kind of training, whether that is language learning, or learning how to be an engineer, or learning how to be a doctor. I mean, why else do they give you prac when you're a doctor or a nurse? They send you on prac so you can deal with patients who are not going to be textbook cases where you can read step 1, step 2, step 3. It's a spontaneous person, and you have to use what you've learned in class, in your uni lectures and your tutorials and so on, to then think, okay, what should I do in this spontaneous situation? Like, if what Antony's saying is true, then all that will be completely useless. And I honestly don't see how he can really base that on fact.
Got to partner up with someone. Do, feel it, you feel it, yeah, bang, feel it, bang.
Feel it, bang, feel it, bang. It's just the way he's saying this, it really just screams out to me as someone who doesn't actually know what they're talking about with weapons.
I want to fight Koryu people in Koryu style.
But if you haven't actually trained in Koryu, then how are you going to fight in a Koryu style? In my personal opinion, feel free to ignore it. You're more than welcome to ignore it if you want, but get a trainer first. Get someone who has more experience in this than you do. Don't just claim, oh, but Koryu has changed for a long time and I can't learn anything from that, therefore I'm not going to learn it. No. Still learn from them, because even if Koryu has changed over a certain amount of time, and by Koryu I mean various different systems, even if they have changed, there are still clues within that show you the combat of the time, that show you the techniques that were used at the time, because let's face it, there are only so many ways to use a sword effectively, because whether it was 600 years ago, whether it was 100 years ago, whether it was yesterday, physics is physics. Footwork is footwork, angling is angling, and range is range. All of those things are still very useful. Still get advice from people and credit them as well, obviously. Get information from people who know more about this than you do. Don't just go out there and start sparring without having any kind of idea of how to use a weapon, and especially how to use it safely, because this is very dangerous, even if you have protective gear, because again, I've seen people get injured wearing protective gear before, and that is with two guys who knew what they were doing and have been training. With someone like you who has very little experience, and you've admitted that, and that's cool, don't just go out there and spar. Get someone to actually give you some instruction first. I've said what I wish to say. He goes on with on the video, and I'm not going to go through the entire video because it's about 11 minute long video. Again, there are a couple points in there that he said that there is truth behind that, and it is important to mention. But there is also a lot of issues I have with this video as well, and I hope that I was polite. I hope that what I've said has made sense. But that's all I wanted to say. I hope you found this video interesting, whoever you may be. But until next time, I will see you mates in the next video. All right, bye-bye.